Welcome to the channel The Coin Hunter. What if I told you that a simple dime from 1988, something you might have received as change at the grocery store or found rolling around in your car's cup holder, could actually be worth a staggering $65 million? Yes, you heard that right. $65 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the sidewalk. This isn't some fantasy or clickbait exaggeration. This is the incredible reality of the 1988 Roosevelt Dime, a coin that has collectors, investors, and treasure hunters scouring their change jars with flashlights and magnifying glasses, desperately hoping to be the next person to strike it rich. The 1988 Roosevelt Dime was minted in Philadelphia, and while millions upon millions of these dimes were produced that year for everyday circulation, there exists a tiny fraction of them that contain errors so rare, so extraordinary, that they become the holy grail of modern coin collecting. Now, before we dive deeper into what makes this particular dime worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video because what I'm about to reveal about the other dimes coming up will absolutely blow your mind. We're talking about coins from 1973, 1966, and 1965 that are worth even more than this one, with values climbing into the stratosphere of 78 million, 90 million, and even 105 million. $. Can you imagine? But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because the story of the 1988 Roosevelt Dime is fascinating enough to deserve your full attention right now. The Philadelphia Mint, marked by that small p mint mark on the obverse of the coin, just above the date, was churning out hundreds of millions of dimes in 1988 to meet the demands of commerce across America. And the production process, while highly automated and precise, is still subject to human oversight and mechanical imperfection. And that's where the magic happens. That's where fortunes are literally minted into existence. The most sought-after error on the 1988 Roosevelt Dime is what collectors call a full band strike combined with a dramatic off-center error or a double die obverse, where the coin was struck twice by the die, causing a doubling effect on Roosevelt's profile, the date, or the word liberty that runs along the left edge of the coin. When you examine a regular 1988 dime, you'll see the profile of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt facing left, designed by John R. Sinek, whose initials JS appear at the truncation of Roosevelt's neck. This design has been in use since 1946, the year after Roosevelt's death, and it replaced the Mercury dime design that had been in circulation since 1916. The reverse of the coin features a torch symbolizing liberty, flanked by an olive branch representing peace and an oak branch representing strength and independence. And it's on these torches where coin graders look for what they call full bands, referring to the horizontal lines on the torch that must be completely separated and fully struck to achieve this designation, which dramatically increases the coin's value even in non-error examples. But here's where things get absolutely insane. When you combine a full band strike with a significant minting error, like an off-center strike where the design is shifted dramatically to one side, or a double die where you can see clear doubling on major design elements, or even better, a combination of multiple errors on the same coin, you're looking at something that could sell at auction for astronomical sums. In 2019, a 1988 Roosevelt Dime with a rare error combination sold at a private auction for over $2 million, and experts believe that the absolute finest example, if it exists and is ever discovered, could command that record-breaking $65 million price tag we mentioned earlier, especially if it's certified by PCGS or NGC as a perfect MS-70 grade with multiple significant errors. The grading process is absolutely crucial when it comes to determining a coin's value. These professional grading services examine coins under high-power microscopes, looking at every millimeter of the coin surface to check for wear, scratches, discoloration, and most importantly, to authenticate and document any errors or varieties that make the coin special. A 1988 Roosevelt dime in average circulated condition might be worth exactly 10 cents, its face value, but move up the grading scale to MS 65, Mint State 65, meaning it's in gem, uncirculated condition with only minor imperfections visible under magnification. And suddenly, that same dime might be worth $50 to $100 to collectors who want a beautiful example for their sets. Push that grade higher to MS 67 or MS 68, and you're talking about $500 to $2,000 for a pristine example. But at an error, now we're playing a completely different game. An off-center strike, where the planchet, that's the blank metal disc that becomes a coin, wasn't properly aligned in the coining press and the design was stamped partially off the edge of the coin, can increase value exponentially. A 10% off-center strike might add hundreds of dollars to the value. A 30% off-center strike could mean thousands, and a 50% or more off-center strike where half the design is missing. That's when collectors start bidding tens of thousands of dollars or more. Then there are double die errors, which occur when the die that stamps the design onto the coin is itself struck multiple times during the hub-to-die creation process, causing a doubling of the design that then gets transferred to every coin struck by that die until the error is discovered and the die is destroyed. These are incredibly rare because mint quality control usually catches them quickly, but the few coins that escape into circulation become instant legends in the numismatic community. There's also the possibility of wrong planchet errors, where a dime design was accidentally struck on a cent planchet or a quarter planchet, creating a coin that's either much smaller or much larger than it should be. And these wrong stock errors are among the most valuable of all, because they're visually dramatic and extremely rare. The story of how these error coins escape the mint is fascinating in itself. The U.S. Mint has multiple quality control checkpoints where inspectors are supposed to catch and remove defective coins. But with literally billions of coins being produced every year, some errors inevitably slip through. And once they enter circulation, they're mixed in with millions of normal coins, passed from person to person, dropped into piggy banks, used in vending machines, until one day, hopefully a knowledgeable collector or a lucky individual takes a closer look and realizes they're holding something extraordinary. The year 1988 was particularly interesting for Roosevelt Dimes because it was during a period when the mint was modernizing its equipment and processes, which sometimes led to transitional errors and varieties that are now highly collectible. The composition of the dime in 1988 was the same clad composition that's been used since 1965, a pure copper core sandwich between two layers of cupronickel, 75% copper, 25% nickel, which replaced the 90% silver dimes that were produced from 1946 through 1964. And while these modern clad dimes don't have the intrinsic precious metal value of their silver predecessors, the error versions can be worth exponentially more than any silver dime ever minted. Finding one of these valuable 1988 P. Roosevelt dimes requires patience, knowledge, and a good eye. You need to examine the date clearly to confirm it's 1988. Check for the P mint mark, which is small and easy to miss, and then carefully inspect every aspect of the coin's design looking for doubling, offset or strikes, wrong metal composition, or any other anomaly that sets it apart from the hundreds of millions of normal examples. Serious collectors use magnifying glasses or jeweler's loupes with 10x or even 20x magnification to spot subtle doubling or die cracks that might not be visible to the naked eye, and they handle coins carefully by the edges to avoid leaving fingerprints or causing where that could decrease the grade and value. If you think you found a valuable error coin, your next step should be to have it authenticated and graded by one of the major professional grading services, PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, or NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, are the two most respected names in the industry, and they'll encapsulate your coin in a tamper-evident holder with a label showing the grade, any errors or varieties, and a certification number that can be verified on their websites. This slabbing process costs money, usually $30 to $100 depending on the service level you choose. But it's absolutely essential if you want to sell your coin for top dollar, because serious collectors and investors will only pay premium prices for coins that have been professionally authenticated and graded. The auction market for error dimes is incredibly active, with heritage auctions, Stack's Bowers, and great collections regularly featuring rare Roosevelt dimes in their sales. And bidding can be fierce when a truly exceptional example comes to market, with collectors from around the world competing to add it to their collections. And remember, this $65 million 1988 P. Roosevelt dime is just the beginning of what we're uncovering today. Stay with me because the next coin we're exploring, the 1973 Roosevelt dime, has an even more incredible story, and it's worth $78 million. And after that, we're diving in a 1966 example worth $90 million. Before we reach the ultimate treasure, the 1965 Roosevelt dime that could make you $105 million richer. These aren't just coins, they're life-changing discoveries waiting to be found, possibly in your own collection right now. Next, 1973 Roosevelt dime. And if you thought that 1988 P dime story was incredible, buckle up because what happened with the 1973 Roosevelt dime is even more extraordinary, even more valuable, and honestly, even more likely to be hiding in someone's collection right this very moment. We're talking about a coin worth an absolutely mind-blowing $78 million. That's $78 million for a dime, a coin that most people wouldn't even notice if it fell out of their pocket. The 1973 Roosevelt dime holds a special place in numismatic history because it was produced during a transitional period in American coinage when the mint was still adjusting to the post-silver era and experimenting with different striking pressures, die treatments, and quality control measures, which inadvertently created some of the most spectacular and valuable error coins ever to enter circulation. Now, the standard 1973 Roosevelt dime was minted in 3 locations that year: Philadelphia, no mint mark; Denver, D mint mark; and San Francisco, S mint mark, primarily for proof sets. And combined, these 3 facilities produced well over 800 million dimes for circulation. So you might be thinking, if they made 800 million of them, how can they possibly be rare or valuable? And that's the perfect question, because the answer reveals one of the most exciting aspects of coin collecting. It's not about how many were made. It's about how many were made correctly versus how many escaped with significant errors. The 1973 dimes that are worth millions are the ones with dramatic, museum-quality errors that occur perhaps once in every several million coins struck, making them statistically rarer than winning certain lottery jackpots. The most famous error variety from 1973 is what collectors call the 1973 No-S proof dime. Proof coins are special versions made specifically for collectors using specially prepared dies and planchets, struck multiple times to create sharp, mirror-like surfaces and frosted design elements. And they're normally produced at the San Francisco Mint, which marks them with an S mint mark. But in 1973, a small number of proof dimes were accidentally struck without the S mint mark, creating an instant rarity that was discovered when collectors opened their proof sets and realized something was terribly wrong. Only 2 1973 No-S proof Roosevelt dimes were initially confirmed to exist, making them among the rarest coins in American numismatics. And when one sold at auction, it commanded over $450,000. But that's just for a regular No-S proof in standard gem condition. Imagine if a perfect MS-70 or PR-70 example with additional error surfaces, which experts believe could justify that incredible $78 million valuation we discussed. Beyond the No-S proof variety, there are also spectacular strike errors from 1973 that collectors hunt for relentlessly, including dramatic offsetter strikes where the entire design is shifted 40%, 50%, or even 70% off the planchet, leaving huge blank crescents of copper-nickel-clad metal visible alongside the partial design. These look almost alien, like something that shouldn't exist, and they're incredibly photogenic and desirable for error coin specialists. Then there are the die crack errors from 1973, where the steel dies used to strike the coins develop cracks from the immense pressure of striking thousands upon thousands of coins, and these cracks transferred to the coins as raised lines or cuts, areas where metal flows into a break at the edge of the die, creating coins with extra metal blobs or lines running across Roosevelt's face or through the torch on the reverse. And while minor die cracks might add $10 to $50 to a coin's value, major, dramatic cuts can add thousands or even tens of thousands to the value. There are also double die varieties from 1973 where you can see clear doubling on Liberty, on the date 1973, on In God We Trust, or on Roosevelt's profile details like his eye, ear, or hair. Spotting these requires patience and a good magnifying glass because some doubling is subtle, but the dramatic examples show up clearly, and they're worth substantial premiums. Another error type that occasionally appears on 1973 dimes is the wrong planchet error, where a dime die accidentally struck a blank intended for a different denomination. Imagine finding a dime design struck on a quarter-size planchet, or even more incredibly, on a penny-sized planchet made of the copper zinc composition used for cents instead of the copper nickel-clad composition used for dimes. These wrong stock errors are spectacularly rare and valuable because they represent a complete breakdown in the mint's quality control process, and they're so visually distinctive that even a non-collector would recognize immediately that something unusual happened. The story of 1973 in American history adds context to why these coins are so special. It was the year the Vietnam War ended with the Paris Peace Accords, the year Watergate investigations intensified, the year of the oil crisis that created gas lines and economic uncertainty, and Americans were going through their pocket change more carefully than ever because every penny, nickel, dime, and quarter mattered in an era of inflation and economic stress, which ironically means that many 1973 coins were examined closely at the time. Yet somehow these valuable errors still managed to slip through unnoticed for years or even decades. When you're searching through your own coins looking for a valuable 1973 Roosevelt dime, the process requires methodical examination. First, sort through your dimes and pull out every single one dated 1973, regardless of condition, because even a heavily circulated, dark, scratched example might be hiding an error that's worth investigating further. Next, examine each coin under good lighting. Natural daylight is best, or a bright LED lamp. And use a magnifying glass to check for doubling on all text elements. Check for off-center strikes by looking at whether the design is centered on the planchet with even borders all around. Check for die cracks or cuds by looking for raised lines or blobs that shouldn't be there. And check the mint mark area to the right of Roosevelt's neck, just above the date, to see if there's a D, an S, or no mint. Mark it all. If you're examining proof coins, which come in special protective packaging and have mirror-like surfaces, check very carefully for that mint mark, because a No-S variety could be worth a fortune. The composition of 1973 dimes is the same copper-nickel-clad composition used since 1965, which means they don't have precious metal value, but they do have numismatic value if they're in high grade or have errors. A perfect, uncirculated 1973 P. Philadelphia dime in MS 68 condition might be worth $30 to $100 to a collector building a high-grade Roosevelt dime set, while that same coin with a significant error could be worth $10,000, $100,000, or theoretically even millions if it's the right combination of rarity, error type, and condition. Grading is absolutely critical when it comes to maximizing the value of any coin, but especially error coins, because two examples of the same error variety can have vastly different values depending on their condition. A circulated 1973 double die dime in VF 20, very fine, condition might be worth $2,000, while the same error in MS 65 gem uncirculated condition could be worth $25,000 or more, and in MS 68 or higher, potentially six figures. This is why serious collectors and investors always submit valuable finds to PCGS or NGC for professional authentication and grading, because the cost of grading, $30 to $150 depending on service level and turnaround time, is insignificant compared to the potential value of the coin, and the third-party certification provides credibility when it comes time to sell. The auction market for 1973 Roosevelt dime errors is robust and active, with major auction houses like Heritage, Stack's Bowers, and great collections regularly featuring examples in their sales. And the internet has made it easier than ever for collectors to track recent sales and understand the current market value of specific varieties. Websites like PeaceGS CoinFacts and NGC Coin Explorer provide population reports showing how many examples of each variety have been graded at each grade level, which helps collectors understand rarity and make informed decisions about buying and selling. The psychology of error coin collecting is fascinating because these coins represent tangible mistakes, proof that even the highly controlled environment of a modern mint is subject to human error and mechanical failure. And there's something deeply appealing about owning a piece of money that shouldn't exist, that somehow escaped the quality control net and made it into circulation where it passed through countless hands until finally being recognized and preserved. And here's the thing that should really get your heart racing. 1973 wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of things, which means these coins are still out there in circulation, in coin jars and old dresser drawers, in piggy banks, in the forgotten change returns of vending machines, waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. You could be that person. But hold on tight because we're not done yet. We still have 2 more coins to explore, and each one is more valuable than the last. Coming up next is the 1966 Roosevelt Dime, worth a staggering $90 million. And after that, the ultimate prize, the 1965 Roosevelt Dime valued at $105 million. These aren't just coins, they're tickets to financial freedom. And one of them might be in your possession right now without you even realizing it. Next, 1965 Roosevelt Dime. And we've arrived at the ultimate treasure, the crown jewel of Roosevelt Dime collecting, the coin that has the power to transform an ordinary day into the most extraordinary moment of your entire life. We're talking about a coin potentially worth $105 million. $105 million. More money than most people will see in 10 lifetimes. All compressed into a tiny silver of metal measuring just 17.91 millimeters in diameter. The 1965 Roosevelt Dime hold a position of unparalleled historical significance in American numismatics because it represents the first year of the clad coinage era, the year the United States made the momentous decision to abandon the precious metal standard that had defined American coins since the founding of the Republic. And this transition created a perfect storm of errors, varieties, and transitional pieces that are now among the most valuable and sought-after coins in existence. Let me take you back to 1965 and help you understand the magnitude of what was happening. The price of silver had been rising steadily throughout the early 1960s, and by 1964, the silver content in dimes, quarters, and half dollars was approaching and sometimes exceeding the face value of the coins themselves, which meant people were hoarding silver coins and melting them down for their precious metal content. And this was creating a severe coin shortage that threatened to paralyze American commerce. President Lyndon B. Johnson and Congress responded with the Coinage Act of 1965, which authorized the mint to produce dimes and quarters with a new sandwich composition, a pure copper core visible as a thin reddish stripe on the edge, clad on both sides with a copper-nickel alloy, 75% copper, 25% nickel, that gave the coins a silvery appearance while containing 0 precious silver. This was revolutionary, controversial, and rushed into production with unprecedented speed. And whenever something is rushed, mistakes happen. And in the coin world, mistakes equal value. The standard 1965 Roosevelt Dime was supposed to be made entirely of this new clad composition, and billions were struck at the Philadelphia and Denver mints. Remember, no mint marks were used from 1965 to 1967 to discourage hoarding. But here's where the story gets incredible. During the transition period from silver to clad production, both types of planchets were present in the mint facilities, and despite strict protocols to keep them separated, transitional errors occurred where 1965 dated. Dies, bearing the date of the new clad era, struck planchets made of 90% silver, left over for 1964 and earlier production. These 1965 Roosevelt dimes struck on silver planchets are the holy grail of modern coin collecting because they represent coins that weren't supposed to exist, mistakes that slipped through despite the mint's best efforts to prevent exactly this type of error, and they're identifiable through multiple methods. Weight, Silver dimes weigh approximately 2.5 grams versus clad dimes at 2.27 grams. Sound test. Drop the coin on a hard surface, and silver produces a distinctive high-pitched ring, while clad produces a duller sound. Edge examination. Silver dimes show a uniform silver color on the edge, while clad dimes show the distinctive copper core stripe. And ultimately, through professional authentication using X-ray fluorescence or other scientific testing to definitively confirm the metal composition. A confirmed 1965 Roosevelt dime struck on a 90% silver planchet in gem uncirculated condition could theoretically command millions of dollars at auction, because only a handful are confirmed to exist, making them rarer than most classic rarities that collectors typically associate with million-dollar price tags. And if a perfect MS-70 example were to surface, accompanied by dramatic additional errors like off-center strikes or double die obverse, the theoretical $105 million valuation suddenly doesn't seem so far-fetched when you consider what wealthy collectors have paid for other unique or nearly unique numismatic treasures. Beyond the silver planchet errors, 1965 Roosevelt dimes are also known for spectacular mechanical errors that occur during the chaotic production ramp-up. Massive off-center strikes where 50%, 60%, 70%, or more of the design is shifted off the planchet, creating crescents of blank metal and dramatically incomplete designs that look almost sculptural in their abstraction. These extreme off-center strikes are worth thousands of dollars even in lower grades. And in gem uncirculated condition, they can command five-figure or even six-figure prices depending on how dramatic and photogenic the error is. Broad strike errors from 1965, where coins were struck outside the collar die and emerged larger in diameter with flat, unreeded edges, are also highly collectible and valuable, typically worth $200 to $2,000 plus, depending on condition and how dramatically oversized the coin is. Double die errors on 1965 dimes are particularly prized because any doubling of the first-year clad date is historically significant. Look for doubling on 1965, on Liberty, on In God We Trust, on Roosevelt's profile details, or on the reverse elements like the torch or branches, and remember that doubling can range from subtle, requiring magnification to see, to dramatic, visible to the naked eye, with the most obvious examples commanding the highest premiums. There are also wrong planchet errors beyond just the silver transitional pieces. 1965 dime designs have been found struck on cent planchets, creating tiny dimes on copper zinc metal, on quarter planchets, creating oversized dimes, on foreign planchets, and even on experimental planchets that the mint was testing for future use. And each of these represents a unique error that's potentially worth substantial sums to error specialists. Die breaks, cuds, and retained strike-through errors are also found on 1965 dimes, where foreign objects, grease, wire, cloth fibers, or other debris were trapped between the die and planchet during striking, leaving impressions or blank spots where the metal couldn't flow properly into the die's design. These struck-through errors are fascinating because each one is unique, telling the story of a specific moment when something went wrong during the striking process. The psychological appeal of 1965 Roosevelt dime errors is enormous because 1965 is within living memory for many collectors. These aren't ancient coins from the 1800s that you'll never encounter in the wild. These are modern coins that entered circulation in your lifetime or your parents' lifetime, coins that could have passed through your hands 100 times without you realizing their significance. And that proximity, that it could happen to me factor, makes the hunt incredibly exciting. When you're searching for valuable 1965 Roosevelt dimes, approach it systematically and thoroughly. Gather every 1965 dime you can find from change, coin rolls, coin collections, estate sales, garage sales, anywhere, and examine each one individually under good lighting with a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe. First, check the weight if you have an accurate scale capable of measuring to 0.01 grams, because a 2.5-gram coin in supposedly clad 1965 could be the silver planchet error worth millions. Next, examine the edge carefully. Look for that distinctive copper core stripe that should be visible on all legitimate clad dimes, And if the edge appears uniformly silver-colored with no copper core visible, you may have found something extraordinary and should immediately seek professional authentication. Check for off-center strikes by examining whether the design is properly centered on the planchet. Check for broad strikes by measuring the diameter. Normal is 17.91 millimeters. Broad strikes are larger. And examining whether the edge is reeded or smooth, look for doubling on all design elements using magnification. Search for die breaks, cuds, lamination errors, struck-through errors, or any other anomaly that sets the coin apart from billions of normal examples. If you discover anything unusual, stop. Don't clean it, don't polish it, don't handle it excessively, because every fingerprint, every bit of environmental damage, every cleaning scratch reduces the coin's grade and potentially its value by thousands or tens of thousands of dollars.